never been the one to stay in just one place, mine. But I love the music, we turn up the screen and they fly. From the mountain tops to an eastern block, or a tropical island to catch a nice vibe. But no matter
that's why. That's why.
That as a father of a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old, I was quite shocked at the way in which being a parent of young children changes my view of technology in the world. So I worked in education for a long time before I had the children, but I am still trying to figure out quite what the last 45 years of my life means now that I see it through the eyes of a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. So that's me, my A side, and my B side.
Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone. My name is Luke Grimmett. I teach STEAM class at Cayman International School to elementary students. I would say my A side, I was kind of thinking of us doing over it today. I'm a generational teacher, so I've got lots of family who have taught over the course of years. So I'm a generational teacher, always looking for opportunities to support my habit of teaching. That's what we called it in public schooling in the States. It was quite a bit harder teaching there. B side, I was kind of asking some of my colleagues, like, what's my B side here? I want to be the same guy all the time. I'm a prolific activity seeker. That doesn't mean I stay in one lane all the time. I like to try so many things, and I think maybe that supports my habit of learning. So that is my B side.
Thank you. Good evening again, everyone. I'm Jenny Philip Durham. I'm the interim provost and vice president for academic affairs at the University College of the Cayman Islands. And my substantive role is that I'm the dean of humanities and social sciences. My A side is that I'm a researcher and academic through and through. Sometimes I dabble a bit in administration. And my B side is that I'm an introvert. So if you see me quietly whisk away afterward, means my social battery has died and I am just going to recharge it for a bit. So good to be here with all of you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kevin Brett, and my A side is that I'm an audit director at KPMG in the Cayman Islands. I also am the chair of the Audit Innovation Committee for KPMG Islands Group, which is a sub-region made up of islands around the world. And then my B side, I'm a father of 2 kids, and I have a dog, and I'm expecting another child next month. My beautiful wife is in the room. So a little bit of a contradiction to all the rules I have to follow. Not a lot of rules in my house get followed compared to my day-to-day. You have to be a little bit creative in how you get your young ones to do what you need them to do and get them to eat their food or get in the bath or whatever, right? And the way I see AI and how it allows you to be more creative and allows you to actually bring innovation to the table in a lot faster way to bring your ideas to life, or my ideas or my team's ideas to life. So I love exploring that creative side that I think AI will allow you to enhance.
Thank you all for humoring me. So I'm Kendra Okonski. My A side is that I'm an economist and a communicator. So I've combined those 2 things in my life to have a deep understanding of public policy issues and then be able to do everything from, write Instagram posts to do websites to all sorts of stuff and evolving that all the time. So, and my B side is that my life is very dominated by 4D. So that's 2 daughters and 4D is 4 dependents, 2 daughters, 2 dogs, and they take up a lot of time and the rules have to be thrown out the window. So I think we're gonna start this. I have a presentation here that I don't know if it's gonna work, so we'll have to see if it works in present mode. So I decided that after our discussion that we would make a playlist based on our discussion because we had some really funny kind of images that came out of it. So we used the AI generator DALL-E to make some images because I'm not an artist, I wish I could be. But DALL-E has changed my life because I can go and create these images that I want it to generate for me. So in the first instance, I was just going to explain that I like this little story that my older daughter was not very successful in team sports. So she went into robotics, and it was really, she found her passion there. And when we moved here and we started this little thing called 345 Robotics, this is her logo. And I love how much it says about things. So I like that as I got to indulge myself as the first with the first record here. Going to work around this right now. And when we all got together to sort of plan our discussion, we thought that this was a really good theme because we all agreed that since this whole discussion has evolved, and our event in March was really well timed in a sense because it was just when ChatGPT hit the news and everyone started to be like, what is this thing? Some people knew about it from before, but others didn't. So I just wanted to tease this out a little bit in our discussion. So I'm going to start with Chris. I liked what he had to say about technology in general. And if you need a little reminder, I'll help you. So.
Well, I worked long enough in government, I'll make it up as I go. Yeah, I mean, as you enter into discussions like this, it's important to keep perspective, especially when you see how this is reported in media and where conversations go. Often, if we're on the user side and on the developer side, this is coming as very new, and our best reference point is Terminator 2, or somebody brought up Lawnmower Man, if you're old enough to have been familiar with that story, and that one as well, further back. But the reality is that if you go back through generations and even thousands of years, every significant technological advancement that we've had as a human society has produced positive results. There has been winners and losers, and there has been byproducts or things that have happened as a result as we evolve. But we're at this interesting point right now that there is great opportunity, and we have to take time to understand it and talk about it and learn about how it's going to impact our lives and our children's lives to ensure that we maximize the opportunities, mitigate to the best possible way any shortcomings of it, and try and avoid any total, complete disasters, which is always possible. But you know, through conversation, through planning, through engagement, through discussion, there's not a need to panic. There's actually a reason to be excited. This is exciting.
Any of the rest of you want to comment on that?
Absolutely, excitement is definitely the name of the game. But being an auditor and being from a professional services firm, we do like to still tread somewhat with a bit of caution, right? We do like to make sure that what we're adopting is working how it's meant to be working. What are the ethics? What are your responsibilities around making sure it's doing what it's supposed to do? Trust is what KPMG sells themselves on, right? So how do we make sure that the technology that we're using can be trusted, especially in a topic around education, how it's going to be used in conjunction with our children?
I'll just jump in to add to that. How many educators are in the room? Oh, and how many educators panicked in November of 2022? I don't think I panicked because as an academic, you see how revolutionary the technology can be. You see, at least I saw immediately the ways in which, rather than trying to ban ChatGPT, rather than trying to ban assisted technology that would assist students, I saw how it could be integrated to revolutionize teaching and learning. The reality is that students are just not as interested and engaged as they were. You walk around the classroom, you're doing observations, their AirPods are in, they're on the tablets, they're on the computers, so we may as well meet them where they are. So the panic response is certainly not helpful, and I really do hope to see some movement toward integration of the technology so that it can supplement what we do as educators rather than trying to stop it. It's already here. It's already here.
Right on the money. Yep, you said it. Don't panic is really easy to say, and I think teachers, especially at our institution, using it for their classes and this kind of thing is so helpful, and they've seen the qualities of it. But telling them not to panic about the kids' use of it has been the real big thing here. So.
Continue reinforcing that message with them.
Absolutely, and Kendra, you shared a resource with me that we're now kind of using at our school, just teaching students and even children what AI is, starting from the most foundational basics. And through that, I think it's teachers, and myself included, are learning a whole lot about what it is, and myself included, are learning a whole lot about what it is, what it took to
have the ability to help that one child or two children that are kind of not catching up fast enough. So in the sense of helping, also spoke about, fill that in a bit.
Center for assistance with their writing, but if you told them they could use Mindplay or something else to assist them in improving their writing, they may be more inclined to use that, because you're in a space in the classroom you sign up for this at this time to 5 in the writing center. They can use Mindplay or whatever else it is asynchronously and be able to build their capacity. So I really do see that being one of the ways in which we can help to improve students' capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, it's the balance of using it as a tool and then as a crutch as well. So we don't want our students, obviously, who are struggling, that could use it as a tool. We want to give them the opportunity to do that. But we don't want them to rely on it so much where they're not able to develop these sort of problem solving or critical thinking skills that are necessary as far as how much to use it and how to use it, and then how to distribute it to the whole class. And you have your learners that will use it for generating ideas or something like that. And you may have learners that use it to organize their ideas. That these ambiguous tools that we have as super powerful tools are there to help kind of guide or whatever it is in that capacity.
And before you came here, you were you had some experience in the public school system in the U.S., maybe in less privileged areas. And I thought it would be interesting if you'd reflect on that. Like, what are the kinds of constraints that those kids have that maybe our kids at CIAIS are at precisely the opposite situation? So
right. I was teaching in Oklahoma in urban setting, 35, 36 kids in a 4th grade classroom, and so in somebody else's voice, so they're able to kind of generate some new ideas. And these sorts of things, like kids can kind of transport themselves out of their reality. Is the first thing that comes to my mind, but that's something to stew on.
To provide equitable opportunities to use it correctly. I think we need to also think a lot deeper. So when you're an educator developing morning. But actually, we have a lot of really great modeling right now already on how education systems and labor markets are going to change, or going to need to change. There's certainly this singularity on the horizon, this moment that we can't reliably say beyond. But we do actually have a lot of experience as a society in dealing with large-scale change, and a lot of the ways that we're changing is a continuity of a pathway. So one thing is, I would say is, you know, before layoffs, you have something called displacement. So in a lot of the modeling you see for labor market transitions and people coming from education to labor markets, they look at displacement and job growth. And AI, we know quite confidently, there's variations in the models. There's going to be a significant amount of displacement in some sectors and a significant amount of long-term growth in others. And a lot of the growth we don't realize till 20 years, and a lot of the displacement we'll see very soon. Displacement doesn't necessarily mean job loss. One of the most displaced sectors is going to be the financial services sector. Financial services, more than most other, what we would traditionally call white-collar sectors, are going to be affected because it can be highly automated. But don't feel sorry for, for our corporate friends just quite yet, because they're not necessarily going to give up the bends, because I mean, if you look at the way the modeling is playing out right now, and you look at the demographics and the opportunities for transitions, there's going to be significant displacement, but there's also going to be significant opportunities for new types of jobs, working with an AI companion, working in very different ways. If you have a university education, your probability of being able to capitalize and increase your relative pay is actually much higher. That creates inverse problems, which we're going to see wage disparity, because on the other end of it, if you're in a call center and a service sector job, even if it requires some level of education, those are going to be redundant. People who make transitions do so within their own sectors. So I think financial services is going to be quite strong. They're going to really focus on upskilling and reskilling. Where we're going to see a lot of turbulence is in areas where people have less education attainment. They can't build on that foundation that Kevin talked about and leverage those new skills in new ways. And so lifelong learning is going to change completely what it means to be a lifelong learner, to engage with education institutions. And education institutions need to change how they teach and how they engage, because there's going to be this revolution in the labor force of how it interacts and how it works with people.
I think we're almost at our question time, and I feel like that's a really nice kind of wrap-up of what we thought we wanted you to come away with, at least from our perspectives. But the questions in these are always way more interesting than us. So I think we'd like to put you on the microphone, if that's okay, if you can kind of wait for it and then make sure you speak right into it so it picks up for the recording.
I just wonder if you guys could talk, or excuse me, you folks could talk to the disconnect. My mother taught for 40 years. I've taught inside the military with a lot of young people all the way up to admirals, of conflicts and complexities that we're facing. But what I see with a lot of kids is there's a disconnect between education and the workforce, what you're learning in the classroom, and how they see any relevance in that to making money and having a life. And particularly for people who are impoverished, that is a #1 focus. So I want to ask and challenge you as an employer and you as educators, what process are you coming up with to use AI as a leveler to help children transition and use an education in practical ways to understand and join the workforce that they face?
Yeah, great question. I mean, this is not a new question. I think this question has been around for a long time in terms of how do you actually transition people into an ever-changing workforce, right? I think what we can be guided by is that the principles always stay the same, right? But how do we make sure we still adhere to the principles of lifelong learning, right? What Genevieve talked about earlier, the policies are there, the principles are there, the integrities are there, but how do you make sure you stay true to them in this world where there's so much swirling new technologies and exciting things pulling you in different directions, right? So how do we make sure that the technology that's used and introduced to kids are still helping them develop those key principal skills, so critical thinking, the creative thinking, problem solving, teamwork and collaboration. These are still skills through throughout time have always been extremely important in the working world, right? So how do we develop AI that continues to build on those key fundamental principles so that they can feed into the workforce? We're still going to need people that are able to lead teams, bring people together, drive passion and be passionate about what they do, right? And that I don't think changes. That's my viewpoint, but I'll let somebody else comment on it. Sorry, just one other point. The way I see the new technology, right, it just enhances your already innate ability. So it's almost like giving you superpowers that you otherwise wouldn't have had before, right? So I can go and create an app. I'm not a data scientist, but I can go do it now because of AI. I can ask it questions and it can provide answers to me. I think it allows you to actually explore your curiosity in a much more profound way and personal way, right? You don't have to do it in a classroom or fear of, you know, being judged by your ideas. But I think if we keep to our core and principles around further education, lifelong learning, I think we'll be okay.
And on top of all of that, I think students are no longer, they're not interested in studying. So apart from integrating the technology, we're moving in the direction of micro-credentialing. Of course, as academics, we become uncomfortable because it means that it could put us out of a job. People are not staying through colleges, higher education systems for that long anymore. So even as we move toward micro-credentialing and shorter-term courses and using the AI with those, I think the important point you raised about marginalized and impoverished communities, that is a reality. And we have to really meet people where we are. And if we're saying that AI is democratizing learning and making AI more accessible, for me, that is really profound, especially for the Caribbean region, because the joke that Chris made about working in government and making things up as you go along, that is a real challenge that we have in the Caribbean. So this gives us the opportunity not only to build capacity, but to be competitive with our counterparts in the global north and in developed countries, and to build out a workforce and a labor market that really students can compete, persons from marginalized communities can compete, and everyone can have access to the same standard, the same quality. Leverage the AI to benefit from that.
Okay, my question is, today, EDU, they made history today. So the European countries, they made history today. They put rules in progress for AI. The very first country. They're setting precedents. So is there a chance that Cayman would actually adopt that?
I can talk about it.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, well, they passed the first hurdle of 3, so they haven't ratified the legislation yet. The legislation reached the first and most significant hurdle, and there's still 2 more to go. It's a comprehensive, for those who aren't familiar, the European Union is really the first major government organization to tackle AI regulation, and the way they're framing it, as I understand it, is using their fundamental human rights framework as a basis for understanding the deployment of AI. So they're not regulating necessarily the development of AI tools, but how they're used in society. So it's significant because it's starting the first philosophical conversation about how humans interact and where we should perhaps, they frame it as guardrails on the different parts. A couple things to note about the way the European concerns or risks that are out there and how it differs are the same. One way it's different is it's talking about the deployment of AI, is my understanding of the way the European approach to it. So it's saying if you're particularly in areas that have a social impact, so everybody has the right to a fair access to credit to support their economic development. So one of the things the EU is very keen on is that an AI will not be solely and independently responsible for assessing somebody's credit rating. And so that's what they create a risk matrix, and they say this is a high-risk activity, will be highly regulated, whereas actually education and some other ones are actually on the lower end of the scale in terms of regulatory requirements because it's not as high in their risk factors. A couple things I'll just say about that. I don't want to go into a whole lecture on the politics of the legal structures, but all of these things happen in a broader context. So I think if you're going to do a dive in the legislation, and everybody should read it, this is actually one of the most accessible and easy to understand pieces of legislation I've ever said. It's easier than the media coverage. Just go to the EU website and read it. is that it happens in a broader context. The EU is not only doing the legislation, but they're also creating an economic framework to drive investment in AI simultaneously, to the tune of about €1 billion to start off per year, and they want to ramp it up to $20 billion per year. They want to create frameworks to support a simpler regulatory regime for small and medium enterprises. So there's a lot going on. You should read about the legislation. It is very important in terms of that first philosophical piece. But look at the big picture. Look at the narrative. Look at the positive. Look at the exciting things they're doing around it as well, including in education, which, by the way, they already were doing in 2017 around AI. So EU was already doing AI educational frameworks in 2017. So education is actually not where they're behind.
So my question really is to the educators in the room. You made a comment earlier about students seeking collaboration from the AI versus necessarily speaking to the professors and the teachers. So none of us can tell the future, yes, but how do you see AI impacting the student-teacher relationship in the next couple of years? Because when I was growing up, we had issues. We came to the teacher after class, we sat, we talked, we collaborated. But with AI now, I type it into ChatGPT and it gives me an answer and I work with that. So what does that relationship look like for the future?
You'd have more time.
Understand what's going on. Going to your point, now what do teachers do in this instance? I think teachers are going to have to spend a lot of time having a look at, what is John doing over here with this AI? Why did he ask these kinds of questions? Or do I need to help and intervene here in terms of getting him to the correct learning path? And then you can actually use that data to come back to the first gentleman's questions around, maybe that feeds into a guidance counseling type AI where his natural interests are coming through from his questions that he's asking the AI and using that data to kind of feed him into the learning path of the profession that would suit him best.
Before here, I was actually living in the subarctic in Canada, and in education there, one of the most important features is instilling Indigenous values and Indigenous perspective, Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing into the curriculum, which is a similar issue here. Now, I'm a structuralist, so I'm probably the other side of the spectrum with you, but the same sort of outcome. What we saw with those is actually the introduction of new technology in the beginning phases, as we see now, can be destructive or hazardous to different ways of engaging and learning and doing, and that's a normal part, and that's why we need to be important. It's new, and we need all the disclaimers, we need to be very cognizant of it, we can't jump into it, we shouldn't throw our kids into it blindly, and we should just dump it in the classroom and say, here, go ahead and learn. At the same time, what we've seen is tremendous empowerment, because what we've got is large language models that can become native language speakers of languages where there's only dozens of people left who can speak it fluently. And they can speak it forever. And so what we're looking at is language as actually the cornerstone of cultural understanding and awareness, being able to be preserved permanently in the way it is spoken, the tones, the inflections, to a tremendous degree of specificity. If we can get it working fast enough, well, we still have elders who can speak and engage in these languages. So huge opportunities if we can get the technology that's that bit further into that area in terms of cultural preservation. One stat I want to throw out, I know I've been on the mic a lot, but one of the most interesting ones in gender, which is another dimension of social change that's going to happen through this, is actually short-term, what the projections are is there'll be actually significant loss of women in the labor force, or displacement, not loss, I got to stick to my own rules here, displacement, because women right now in the labor force disproportionately fill many service positions. So you'll see women disproportionately affected. That's something to be conscious of, that we need to look to try and mitigate, to be equitable in how this technology moves forward. At the same time, the 20-year, 30-year projections are actually, will be a great equalizer in gender and in culture and in different barriers right now, because it can empower people and give them tool sets that they may not otherwise have access to or not had access to in their lives. So an AI companion can be an equalizer. It's a lot of the models show in 20 years that actually much more gender equality in the workforce across different labor sectors.
Do we have any more burning questions?
I've got a couple here. Just like the panel's thoughts on what happens when we move to a period where the data sets start to be monetized. I know a lot of this training has been off open source, but clearly, OpenAI was open when it was open source, but they're now for profit. And I guess the next question feeding off that is, someone spoke earlier about a learning companion throughout the life of a learner. There's sort of the ethical question about what happens when conceivably every question that you've put in to your learning companion can be analyzed, and where does that data go, and just thoughts on how that's going to work within your industry, because there's a lot of opportunity for both gain and when money's at stake, people make some questionable choices.
I like how we're going to end on a really light one.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Those are good questions, and others can jump in opinion. Open source has always been a passion of mine as well. It's a really important piece of not only technological development, but learning, because it creates more equitable opportunities. Because when I was 20 years old, I could set up my own Linux servers, and I could play with the technology, and I could learn how to use Apache web server, and that's how I got into technology. So that was all because they were free and open source. And the nature of those and how they were constructed and the philosophies of them influenced me. So there's a kind of digital socialization that happens, and when you're in a corporate environment, people are concerned that you don't have control. That is Microsoft controlling the trajectory of how ChatGPT will be framed and so on, as we move from what, if those who aren't aware, ChatGPT was a nonprofit organization or a not-for-profit corporation. It made a decision, quite wisely, now that it's worth billions of dollars, to transition to, or from their perspective, into a for-profit private company. On that particular note, I think that we just have to be vigilant, and as users, we should be looking at constantly alternatives. So don't just go to ChatGPT 4. ChatGPT 4 is awesome, but how many of us have tried alternatives to ChatGPT 4? How many of us, I'm trying right now to use one new AI app every month. And as much as possible, we try these other ones. The only way that we'll keep away from proprietary systems solely is to create users in non-proprietary systems. It's the only way that we do it, is by our vote as a consumer. And that's challenging, that's hard. What was your second one? Was around education. A quick one at the end about privacy and AI. The only thing I'll say on this, you want to go ahead, Kevin?
I was just going to say, data privacy is data privacy, right? The concern is still there today, even before AI. Data privacy was still an issue, and something we are constantly trying to get to grips with. I think those rules still apply, but the data almost becomes even more valuable than it was before, right? I don't have the answer of how we secure it better. It does come down to trust, but how do we make sure that trust is upheld and people are doing what they say they're going to be doing? This is an area where I believe KPMG can be of service. How do we increase trust in an area where there is potentially a lack of trust, and the breaking of trust can do a huge harm to this new and exciting technology, right? So it's a big question, and I don't have the answer.
I generally take the less popular route. There was actually a great panel on this. CEC did a tech talk on privacy in the digital world a couple weeks ago, which was really good. My view is that we need to be very cognizant of our own bias and how we frame what privacy is. My privacy is built on what my grandparents understood to be privacy, which my mother inherited, which she passed on to me. And when I was growing up in a fairly digital world in my 20s and 30s, I say growing up, I'm still growing up, I refer to her as the sort of little old lady with cats in a tinfoil hat. She's paranoid about privacy, and I do understand that. But at the same time, how many here think that they would be completely screwed in their privacy if I knew your mother's maiden name? How many of you have given your mother's maiden name as a security question as you log in? I mean, we relinquish personal information in a much different way than we used to. I think we need to reconceptualize what is privacy. When my grandparents never conceptualized that a camera and a computer could identify me in a split second, part of a second, and convey that information and as part of a regular security check through a public place. These types of systems and environments didn't exist. I think we need to reconceptualize and understand what we mean for privacy, because privacy, the point I'm getting to, is privacy is not an end. It is a means to an end of being safe and secure in our lives and being able to be empowered and fulfilled. It is not, in my view, an ends unto itself. So I think we need to question what privacy means so we can continue to be empowered and not limited, but at the same time protect what's important.
And we can also look at it in terms of trying to make that data more decentralized in the sense that we can also benefit from our data. So there's a huge movement around us right now to shift the internet towards that direction. So I think it'll be really interesting how these two kind of collide, and you know, it's a very disruptive technology in all senses. One of the reasons we decided to focus on education was that just seemed like a kind of low-hanging fruit in a sense, because these questions about regulation here, this is intended to be an event about the Cayman Islands, right? Not the rest of the world. How is it going to impact us here, and how can we influence what the trajectory is here as parents, as educators, as business people, as mentors, and all the other roles that we play in the community here. So I didn't mean to try and wrap this up, but I think unless there's any other questions, we probably will formally wrap up. I just have one more slide, which is our little QR code. If you want to kind of sign up to hear about future things that we're doing or have input into them, or you have some expertise that you can bring to bear, that's just a little form. We will not share or sell, etc., your data. And thank you for being such a great audience, and thank you to this amazing panel. I think we really covered like a gamut of interesting topics, and probably could yak all day about it, to be honest, but I think it was really fun to work with all of you, and you did a great job. So.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. So much to think about, and I think a lot of conversations are going to continue. So please do stick around. KPMG is our hospitality sponsor for tonight, who are assisting with the bar. So if you want to stick around for another drink or two, please do. And thank you again to our sponsors, the Cayman Islands Artificial Intelligence Society, AI Forum, and Cayman Enterprise City for putting this event together. We had over 104 applicants to the internship program, all students who want to get involved in the tech sector and in innovation and learn about AI and how to use it. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or taking on an intern, please talk to my colleague Alyssa at the back, and we're really going to help those students out. So thank you very much. Have a lovely evening.